Hey, what's up? I got. Ooh, tire screech. That's fun. Okay. Hey, I got thoughts. I got thoughts and ramblings on character design and character design specifically in adult animation and also the idea of age demographics in animation broadly. I think that more than live action animation is kind of dependent on selling themselves as applicable to a certain demographic, which is like not healthy. I think that that's a bad way to make art, but I understand it from like a business practice perspective. I also don't think that it's necessarily wrong for an artist to be considering an audience, like an intended audience when they are making something, but I think that that audience, they shouldn't have the defining characteristic of like a number. The thing that you're looking to shouldn't be how many years they have. It should be something like, what they're interested in, be that subject matter or tone or like perspective. And that's like a very idealistic concept, but I think that it should more or less be an afterthought what age you are trying to hit in a world where the number one priority is making a solid piece of art. But I think that animation is in a spot where, like, because we are a little bit more niche than live action, we have a little bit less broad appeal, I think. It's really important for animation projects to announce very loudly and very upfront the sort of demographic of the sort of people we are hoping to reach, which makes it so that kids shows are very obviously for kids and adult shows are very obviously for adults. And every single project is sending up flares constantly trying to indicate what kind of content they are, because if you don't find an audience immediately, then you're like just fucked, right? You have to let it be known right off the bat, this show is for kids. And when it's a show for kids, that means that they get to have colors and really interesting characters and fun and whimsical worlds. And then when a show is for adults, it means you get fucking lame characters and boring worlds and, settings that are just entirely bland and lifeless. And this isn't like completely, across the board. Obviously, there are amazing animation projects for adults that are incredibly creative, but I think that there is also a large swath that are afraid and like embarrassed of their medium because it's widely regarded as kid stuff. I think largely we're kind of growing away from it as my generation ages into, like a place where we probably don't have expendable income, but we do have some sway in the market. And I think that is it's so cynical. It's so fucking lame to say sway in the market, but like Netflix's fucking Avatar, like, and the fact that exists, that Netflix through whatever corporate analysis bingo bongo decided that show was worth making and there was an audience for it, whether or not it's a complete waste of time and money, which I think it is an indication that there's enough like cartoon nerds to warrant that money being spent. And they got renewed for like another 2 or 3 seasons, which is, again, I don't like that it exists, but it's like, hey, at least they think that we want something to do with the project, I guess. I don't know. I have such a bone to pick with live action remakes, as if that's like an appropriate name, when 90% of the show is like CGI, but whatever. That's so besides the point. Also, you got shows like Bluey being shown so much love and appreciation by people outside of the demographic, and that's just coming about because it's a show that's created with like a lot of care and intentionality, which I super love. I love the idea of the creators of Bluey seeing what they are doing as something that can be more broadly appealing and can be more than just a show for preschoolers. And then to, find an audience with adults and also be effective as a show for preschoolers. Like, that takes so much skill, and it's artful. It's commendable. I'm into it. I've only seen like 5 episodes of Bluey, but I'm like, hey, thanks, I guess. Good job. Anyways, I mostly am just thinking about adult animation right now because the way that things are currently, there isn't really anything being made for young adults, I guess, for teenagers. Because there's just like not a demo. There's not money to be made in that demographic specifically. And while the industry is operating off of this system of demographics, there isn't going to be anything made for young adults, until young adults have expendable income or any influence over what is made by streaming services. Like, teenagers aren't paying for streaming services, so why would they make young adult content for them? And then I don't actually really fully understand what the situation is with preschool shows, but I guess they still get made. Basically, the middle class of animation is dying out. The middle class has been gripped and choked out by the hands of capitalism. I can't believe I'm fucking doing this right now. Whatever. It's so cliche. God damn it. So the alternatives are incredibly kiddie content, which is fine. And like, I like preschool stuff. I have done work for preschool shows, or, adult content, where the tenets of adult animation right now aren't so much maturity. I actually feel like a lot of it is immaturity. I think that for a project to be in a position where they have to declare incredibly loudly and send up countless like signal flares that they are for adults, it results in like gross out comedy or, incredibly crude humor. The things that should define adult content, like mature themes or, sex or violence, like, those are things that can be used tactfully. And I mean, largely are and largely should be. But if you're defining your work by that in excess, by those like, concepts in excess, it's sloppy, it's crass, when all that stuff should be subtle and should be like handled very cautiously. And obviously, again, this isn't to say that all animation is like this. I just think that a lot of animation that is produced currently is incentivized to be like this, and I think it's kind of a bummer. More and more projects are being greenlit and being decided whether or not they will be made by people who don't necessarily care about animation as an art form or don't really understand it. More and more you have companies that are like being overlooked by people like David Zaslav, who like doesn't understand the fucking Stanford marshmallow experiment, much less the value of art in a healthy and functioning society. So the shit just doesn't get made if it doesn't seem like there are numbers to back it. And animation as a medium, by virtue of, the process and the appeal, it just takes a really long time. It takes a long time to make, and then it takes usually a long time to find an audience, which, is kind of, it goes in the face of capitalism's whole shtick, which is like, fucking get it now, baby. I want it now. I don't know. I feel like, and, disclaimer, I've done zero research and I actually don't really even know all that much, but I feel like a lot of shows will take influence from The Simpsons. And it makes sense because The Simpsons they were like the first serialized adult animation, and they were, I think they probably still are kind of like the largest and the best to ever do it. Just if you're going based off of cultural impact and the money they generated, which is, what a lot of these projects are being steered by, of course. And obviously taking inspiration from The Simpsons is like not a bad thing. It's actually probably great. It's just that when every show is doing it, it becomes not distilled, the opposite of distilled, diluted. It becomes diluted. And less people understand what was great about the thing they are originally, they're pulling from. You could say taking inspiration from, but if you're being less charitable, they're copping their shit. They're just like ripping it off. Also, like, The Simpsons had tons of whimsy and originality in it to begin with, and that's because, it was original. It was the first to do a lot of what it was doing. The Simpsons is great, but you got so much other great stuff that you could pull inspiration from, and there's no real reason to ignore everything that has come before and just take from like the single source that is, oh, it's the adult animation thing that exists, so let's do like the adult animation thing. When, I don't know, obviously Simpsons was just doing its own thing. It was like incredibly original, and it's successful on account of that, but people, or I guess really like, focus groups, network executives. I don't know how this works, guys. I just see what's being made. I think that they take the wrong lessons and they see the things that signal adult content and they just will rip that whole cloth and then not take any of the subtlety that was like underneath it. I don't know. I really, I'm just getting to the point. I think that things are kind of shifting a little bit. I think that, just as an indicator, the fact that we have Netflix's Avatar, it's like, oh, okay, so adults kind of like cartoons now. They're starting to like cartoons. Maybe enough of the population isn't incredibly cynical and jaded to the point where they can enjoy a cartoon and not feel like they're less of an adult for enjoying a cartoon. I think there's a decent reason why it's harder for animation to find an audience than live action stuff. And it's mostly like, in watching anything, you have to suspend disbelief a little bit. And suspending disbelief like that, it's kind of like playtime, like you're kind of playing pretend for a bit. And with live action projects, the amount at which you're playing pretend is like pretty small. And then as you get to stuff that is more cartoonish, you're playing pretend a little bit more. And adults are doing a little bit more legwork to identify with a face that is drawn, a face that is an emulation of a face, rather than a face that is just clearly like an actual face. And that's like, okay, I'm not lamenting that this is the case. I think that this is also a strength of animation. It just means that there's a very like granular amount of additional legwork that has to be done by the audience in order to like identify with the characters and engage with it. And maybe some of them are legitimately like embarrassed or think that it's like less for them because it's more play, because it's a little bit more just fabricated, I guess, a little bit more pretend. That's fine. That's how it is. It just also means that we get fucking live action remakes of Disney movies and a perfect show. Avatar is like a borderline perfect show, and like people looked at it after 10 years and they're like, great job with this. You really knocked it out of the park. One minor error, just a bit of an oversight. You made it in a medium for babies. I don't know if you fucking caught that. Don't worry, we're going to swoop in. We're going to make it just right. We're going to put the real people in there, and they're going to have skin, and they're going to have the fabric that goes in the wind, and airbending is going to look fucking garbage. But okay, I say all this. The show looks pretty good, like given what it is. I'm sure very talented people worked very hard on it. I'm sure, clearly, of course. But it's just like, why? It's just like, why spend so much money, so many millions of dollars to make something that didn't need to be fixed, like to fix something that was almost perfect, like really, really, really good. I don't know. Like live action remakes of Disney films are insane, but I get it because what they're doing is they're effectively trying to give permission to like scared, timid little Disney adults to enjoy their favorite movie about about lions, as if they needed permission, as if it was something that like was required at any point in time. Anyways, all this to say, I think that things are getting better more and more gradually. I think that people, well, I don't know, I live in sort of a bubble, but I kind of get the impression with my like internal barometer that people my age are starting to have, a stronger affinity for cartoons, and it's not like something that's like getting worn down with time and our sad minds and bones and bodies. I hope, at least. I think that there's room for more whimsy in adult animation. I want to do it. I want to participate. I want to make whimsical adult characters. I want characters that have, you know, weird shapes and colors and make playful expressions and also are fully capable of being genuinely hurt or emotional or having, like, you know, strong opinions on issues or it just like there's this idea that like cartoon characters kind of exist in juxtaposition with character depth, and I think that's silly. I think that characters can be cartoonish and can also have so much depth. It's not wrong to be defined by one sort of like core facet, which, you know, is the case with most cartoon characters. They usually fall into an archetype if they're doing a good job. But you can then also make them crazy nuanced. I don't know. I hope. And I think the only thing that's really holding it back is trying to signal immediately that the show is for adults, which just leads to boring characters like men with like just fucking t-shirts and button downs, and it's like, you know, it's just like, so it's like a nuclear family, a sort of like sitcom situation is kind of what I'm picturing, which is whatever. Like projects like that can be fine. It's just that there's so much other art to pull from. There's so many other things that you could pay homage to, and rather than showing love and affection for what the medium has to offer through its limitless potential, you are scared and announcing, we're not like that. We're not one of the baby ones, guys. I swear we're for the big boys who like to talk about like the genitals and aren't scared of guns. And like, I don't know. It's anyways, I made this guy. He's a dinosaur. He was inspired by my friend and roommate who has like a deep love and affection for Godzilla. And I don't know. I like him. I think he's cute. I think he's sweet. I wanted him to appear sort of like strong and reliable, but also very soft and sweet. I imagine if you touch him, he has a vaguely like stuffed animal texture to him, or feels kind of like a tennis ball. I think I was mostly inspired by, or sort of like subconsciously pulling from, sort of like Hanna-Barbera character designs. Hence the like hoodie collar. I love how Hanna-Barbera characters are like required to have the collar. Yeah, he also looks almost identical to Schnitzel from Chowder, which I didn't intend going into it, but Schnitzel's hot as hell, so why would I not lean into that? Rada rada, right?